Well, Chris, talk to me a little bit. I know in the past you were in law enforcement and you're not doing that anymore. You're.
Retired. I was injured during a training accident, my gun hand. Sheriff at the time really didn't have too much compassion for anybody who wasn't part of his little clique. So I retired a little early, cashed out, and then started just doing other things. I started a produce and fish market with my father. Old Florida tortilla chips we started, and then wasn't being fulfilled or happy with either one of those. So then I started the gun shop. So just making custom weapons and getting my hands dirty and getting into things that, developing new things. So
Yeah, something a little more fun, right up your alley.
yeah, it's more of a passion. So I just feel good going and doing, what I love to do, instead of being forced to do something.
I gotta say, beard and guns sound better than beard and chips.
Yes. Yeah. When they find all those hairs in the bag, they kind of...
Yeah, they're kind of like, hey, we got returned, what's going on here? So talk to me a little bit about your life. Like, tell me where you're at, like, growing up, what was like childhood like for you?
Well, growing up, my father making a good hefty 6-figure salary, 70s, 80s. My mother was working. She had worked in the medical field, but she was like, bill collections for ophthalmologists and doctors' offices and did different things. I'm the middle of 3. I got an older brother, a younger sister. Growing up, I was the black sheep. I was the odd man out always. It was always my brother or my sister. And very early on, I put up some heavy walls and made some vows that, because I didn't feel like part of the family. I just, as a young kid, everybody's praising one on either side of you, and you're the one that gets, nothing. And, or so it seemed at the time. I mean, now that I look back on it, there was a lot of things that I missed, but you're a kid and you perceive things a lot differently. So I put up these walls of, you know what? I'm not going to let anybody get close to me. I'm not going to let anybody love me or just, get too close, because every time somebody did, I got hurt. I ended up getting hurt, or I put my hopes into being loved by this person, and again, they let you down. There's a lot of my childhood that I don't remember. So I don't know if there were some traumatic experiences that were just blocked out, but there was a good portion of my childhood that I didn't remember. So, growing up, you're always guarded. You see all these people around you, and, you get defensive at everything. You see this person getting away with something, and you're like, why? I want justice on that person right now. You just start getting angry, and that anger just kept building up and building up and building up. And, I didn't let it out. I found good ways to hide it. And then, as you get older, it starts coming out because you can't just hold it back anymore. And then, I was never one to just like start going fighting or anything. But if there was a fight or there was something, I would just, I don't know, go a little overboard because I just had to get all this stuff out, So I wasn't like a bad kid. I wasn't great in school. I hated being in school. Hated sitting there, just doing stuff over and over again. They would have classes, where I went to school, where it was like called Gifted and Talented, where they saw kids that weren't great in school, but they had creativity, and the one thing I wanted to do was be in that class, because then I could express myself. I could be creative. I could do things that actually made me feel good. No, always got passed by, always got, pushed to the corner and just, we're going to let this kid in. And I'm like, how are you going to let this kid in? This kid's a maniac, but, he's got creativity. Yeah, you don't know him like we know him, but, it is what it is. And so forever, I was like always under the radar. But, it just, you grow up and you just push some of those things to the side and say, I gotta do this. I gotta do that. I joined the sheriff's office in '99. And after being 6 months in the police academy, and I always felt, though, that I was like 15 years old, trapped in this old man's body because of the way I thought, because I just couldn't get past a lot of the hurts and a lot of the issues that came up because of the vows that I made, not to let anybody in, not to love anybody. And then, you just pretend, you pretend to love people, you pretend to like people, you pretend to be a normal person, but inside you got this turmoil because you're not. And so I struggled with that forever. I mean, later in life, it came back as depression, like, wouldn't it be just so much easier with the training I have, all the stuff that I have, just to go off and join like a military somewhere and just die on a battlefield where nobody knows, nobody cares, and that's the way I felt. And for a long time, that was my thought process. And then my wife's family introduced me to Christ, which they planted the seed. Don't get me wrong. I had all these bad habits, and I found them at an early age, like pornography. Pornography was my go-to thing to actually feel loved, feel wanted, feel desired. And as a kid, I remember, going to school, trading magazines with friends because their parents had them, and we would do stuff like that. But that was my outlet. And, that just led me down, the wrong path, obviously, for seeing this. And as a young kid, I knew it was fake. I mean, at first, you think this stuff is real. Oh, look at this person, look at the story behind this person. And then you see that same person in another magazine with a different name, different story. And you're like, man, I got robbed. But then you're like, I don't care because this is what I want, and that destroyed most of my life, being involved in pornography. I mean, it just consumed most of my life because I actually, even though I knew it was fake, I knew these things were just fantasy stuff. It just made me feel like I was loved, like somebody would do that for me, to care for me enough to do something like that. You know what I mean? And then it just goes haywire.
So when you're introduced to Jesus eventually, so like, so many guys struggle with that same thing, with like pornography, lust. They go down this deep, deep hole, and then they're like somebody they were never intended to be, because they're wrapped up in that. So I know that, because I had the same struggle, I think a lot of guys have or still do, and it's like awesome when you can step away from that and go, you know what, this is just, when you can finally get real and understand who Jesus Christ is too, like no matter what kind of addiction you're facing, and you can step away from, if it's drugs, lust, alcohol, tobacco, whatever it may be, because guys have different hangups, it might not always be pornography, as far as an addiction, but the second you can step away from that and find your true identity, I mean, you start feeling peace almost immediately. And when you do, it's like you don't want the stuff from the past, because your eyes and your vision just, move in a totally different direction. So I'm thankful you shared that, with us, but like, you said that her parents are the ones that kind of brought you or led you to God eventually. So did you have any upbringing in the church at all?
Well, when I was a kid, we were raised Roman Catholic, and you only went to church during weddings, funerals, and maybe Christmas Eve. So we weren't in the church a whole lot. I had grandparents that were staunch Catholics. My grandmother loved the Lord. She died early on. And the rest of my grandparents, I believe they loved the Lord, but, they were involved in Catholic doctrine where it's, you got to go to a priest. You can't go right to Jesus. and then moving out of New York as a young man, coming here, later on when I started dating my wife, obviously we met in high school and didn't start dating until after high school. And that's when her mother planted the seeds of Jesus, because my wife's grandparents, wonderful, godly people. I mean, they've done so much around the world for other people, in the name of Christ, by his power and, by his provision, that it was inevitable that they were going to come and talk to me about Jesus. And when they did, they planted the seed, and something felt different. Something, was different, but it was still taking hold. It wasn't one of those moments where he cleared the slate and I was a different person and I knew it. So, it just took a little bit of time. And as time went on, we got married. Then I got serious about it and I accepted Jesus Christ, or so I thought, because I was still doing some of the things that I was doing before. They were creeping in. And back then, no matter how hard I prayed for Jesus, just make me a new creation. But I didn't realize that you needed to do that every day, to crucify yourself every day with him. And on the days that I didn't, I could tell, because there was stuff that would creep in, stuff that I would do, be angry, look at pornography, look at people lustfully, curse somebody out, want to fight somebody. And it was those times that, because I was still a young Christian, I didn't understand, because I had nobody to answer the questions. I mean, we started going to these different churches that were big, and the pastor was always looking over your shoulder when they were talking to you to see who's behind you, who's rich, who's, got some clout. And then they would walk away from you, and I couldn't get any answers. And that was the problem, because I couldn't get any answers. Where am I going? How am I going to grow? I read the Bible. I understand some of it, but how am I going to understand all of it? I mean, obviously we're never going to understand all of it until we get to heaven. But there were so many questions, like basic questions, that I couldn't even get answered. And then when you did get an answer, it was this big theological thing that confused me even more than the question I had. So we found a couple of small churches where people took their time, talked with us a little bit here, a little bit there, and my faith would grow and my walk with Jesus would grow. And then, there would be stumbles and setbacks, obviously everybody has them. And I was getting so hard on myself when those times came that I was just like, you know what? I'm not even good enough for heaven. I can't do this. I'm not good enough, Jesus, that you died for me. And it would just throw me into a depression, because I made a mistake. And the way I understood it was, I'm not supposed to be this way. And if I stumble like this and look at something on the internet or do something, now I've got a problem, because I'm not following Jesus. And now that's what held me back for a very long time.
One thing, as you're saying all that right now, is like, when you have a kid, you look at things differently, right? Yeah. So a couple months ago, the baby, I'm holding him and I'm like, oh, I just love him so much, And he punched me because his hands are going all over the place, right? In the eye. And when you get hit in the eye, you hear the liquid, like the fluid. It was one of those kind of hits. And I was like, oh, that really hurt, right? But it was like instantly God was speaking to me through this whole thing. It wasn't like I dropped him or threw him down and said, yeah, you're right. You just hurt me and I'm putting you here, right? So as you're saying those things, as you're searching for God, but still struggling, immediately in that instance, I thought about God, like, man, this is crazy. It's like he's holding us. He wants us to be close to him, right? And we can feel his presence and everything feels great. And then we do something. If it's porn, you stumble, you smoke, you drink, whatever. And you got, in a sense, in that moment, holding my child, I was like, man, I can almost feel like God or the Holy Spirit, like flinching. Yeah. Like, oh, that hurts me, but still not giving up on you. Yeah. Still going, hey, there's hope. Like, I'm your heavenly Father. Like, I'm not I can forgive you. And, you know, when my other son, he has ASD, and it's like things happen. It's like, I don't hate him. It hurts, right? But I still love him. And when you look at that, when you're a dad, you know, some of these young guys aren't dads yet or whatever, or girls, moms, whatever. But it's like when you get into that role, now you can start seeing things a little bit more like how Jesus must feel, or the Holy Spirit at times, like when you do something that he may not approve, right? But he's still there to forgive. His arms are still wide open, like, hey, just come back to me. Like, and then the devil is like trying to steal all the work, all the progress we've made, right? And here he is like trying to take it away, take it away, take it away, take it away, trying to like pull you back in, you know, to feel helpless and hopeless. And I've talked to so many young guys lately, man, about my situation I had to go through with my heart, and like God showed me different things. But like when you were saying that about, you know, making progress, then stumbling, you know, I couldn't help but think of my, you know, holding a little baby, you know, a couple months ago when that happened.